Thank you for joining us for the 2021 Virtual Southern Home and Garden Show virtual presentations. Today we have Dill Hughes talking with us about backyard wildlife. We would like to thank our sponsors, the Pulaski Lions Club, Bankston Motorhomes, Big Creek Winery, Blue Line Pressure Washing Services, Bull on the Run, Farm Bureau, Five Stone Landscaping, Giles County Co-op, Haney Realty and Property Management, Pulaski Electric Company, Pilot Maintenance, Tri-Green Equipment, the Giles County Chamber, and UT-TSU Extension Giles County. We also ask you to be sure to check out our vendors, which are All-American Gutter Protection, Aspen Hill Growers, Butcher Drafting, Columbia Kubota, Flowers Creamery, George's Quilts, Garden Garage Floors, Kathy G Creations, Lane Roofing, and Inglet Leaf Guard. Be sure to check out our website, thesouthernhomeandgardenshow.com. Also find us on Facebook at Pulaski Lions Club Southern Lawn Garden and Home Show. We are also on Twitter and Instagram. We hope to see you soon.
Hello, everybody. I don't know if more folks will join us, but I appreciate you being here. Wildlife is one of those things that I have enjoyed working with and being a part of for a long, long time. Even as a kid, I like to roam around the woods, and as Linda knows, I enjoy hunting and fishing and being outside, and Darby knows that as well. And I guess that's where the passion is drawn from. As well as my dad, he loved to be outside. So I guess when your family likes to be outside, they take you outside and you hope to pass that on. And so I've been involved in a lot of outdoor things with kids over the years. I work with 4-H and some of our programs there as well. But today we want to talk about attracting wildlife around your home. Some of these concepts, I'm the kind of person, I'm always critical of myself. In this presentation, I tweaked it a little bit the last time I did it for a Master Gardener class, but there's some the concepts are the same regardless of the scale that you use these on. And, if you have a big backyard, and when I say big backyard, multiple acres to thousands of acres, the concepts are the same as they would be if you have 2 or 3 acres or even an acre or whatever. But there's things you can do to encourage wildlife around your home. And, I have never run into anyone that did not have, if you're riding down the road, for example, this morning I took a ride. It's turkey season here in Tennessee. I just ride around, like to look, and you see a lot of neat stuff. And wildlife do a lot of really unique things, and the only way you're going to see those is be out there with them. And so this is a way that you can bring some of those things closer to home so that you can actually view them, or your family can view them, those kind of things. And again, my name's Dill Hughes. I'm Extension Director in Murray County here in Middle Tennessee. And this presentation actually comes from Craig Harper, our UT wildlife specialist. And I'll put a plug in for him if you have an interest. In a couple of weeks, on the 21st of this month at noon, he will be doing a presentation on warm season food plots. And those are the plots that do best in the summertime. They're utilized by wildlife during that time of year. You'd think there's plenty of food out there, and that's the case, but the nutrition, you can do some things to improve that for them. So with that being said, we'll move along. So there's a lot of benefits of backyard wildlife, and you can tell that, that I feel pretty strongly about some of those. You provide habitat for wildlife. And if you look at the picture, the top right there, you think, gosh, what a mess. But the fact of the matter is, if you have a nicely manicured yard, or for example, if you're familiar with Lexington, Kentucky, and the horse farms and how manicured they are, their fences, things, the fences are manicured, there's no undergrowth, everything is just almost pristine. Most wildlife have a hard time living in a place like that. They like some areas that we call early successional stages of growth, and we'll talk more about that. But at any rate, you provide the habitat in your backyard. Watching birds watching birds is just really neat. It gets you a field guide try to figure out what you're watching, taking photographs. The ecological benefits is something I think we often overlook. You know, anytime you've got the ground covered and you've got that debris falling on the ground, you're building the soil. You've got more vegetation to improve your air quality. Your energy conservation is good. If you think about the Midwest, for example, you're riding along and there's these huge crop fields, and then you see homes in these little islands that have a handful of trees around them. And that provides shade, and it also provides wind protection. Wildlife habitat in your yard or landscaping, let's just call it landscaping, but you can landscape for wildlife, is going to increase your property values. There's research that's been done, and I don't have it in front of me, but you basically get whatever you put into your landscape in terms of the dollar amount. When you sell your home, or if you choose to do that, you get almost dollar per dollar for what you put into it, because you've got a landscape. And if you've provided a landscape that wildlife prefer, obviously you have a situation where you have a double whammy, where you're doing several good things at the same time. And my favorite probably is a good place for kids. I know as a kid, of course, my grandparents had 50 acres. My granddad had a cow or two and some chickens and different things like that when I was a little boy. But you know, kids just love to be able to roam around on property. And in today's world, you know, it seems like they spend a lot of time on their technological devices, which is not all in all a bad thing. The problem is they spend too much time on those, and they need to get out and they need to learn about the environment, because they're going to be the decision makers one of these days. And it's really important for them to have some hands-on. They need to get their hands dirty. I talked to a lady yesterday who has some property west of here in Hickman County, and she told me that, you know, she said, well, anytime your family wants to go over there, whatever. Of course, my kids are grown; they're in their early 20s. But she said, make sure when you go over there, that you take extra clothes if you have kids or grandkids or whatever the case may be, because they're going to get dirty and they're going to get wet and everything like that. And that just sort of warmed my heart to hear that, because that's what kids need. Kids need some dirt and to expel some energy and work with their hands and get hands-on and things like that. So I personally think the good place for children is really important. So wildlife habitat, when you look at these pictures, your backyard may not look exactly like that, but it could. It's areas that provides the elements that's essential for life, and there's 4 of those elements in a habitat. Food, we all have to have food. We have to have cover or shelter. We have to have water. You know, you think about our bodies being 75+% water, and we have to have space. And, you know, with COVID the last year, you know, everywhere you go, there's a mark on the floor that says get 6 feet apart. But even previous to that, if you were to get in an elevator with somebody, you don't stand side by side unless it's maybe your spouse or whatever. But typically, if somebody's in an elevator and you walk into the center of that elevator, they go to a corner, and you try to maximize that space between you, because it's a little uncomfortable when somebody invades your space. So those are a few things to think about as we go through this. Now, the optimal habitat for one species of animal may not be the optimal for another. Just meaning that everybody don't like the same things. And if you think about in human terms, and I don't want to be anthropomorphic and give wildlife human characteristics, but think about people, okay? And just think about your food source. Some people like some types of food where others don't. You know, kids love to go to McDonald's. Okay, I don't particularly like to go to McDonald's. So you know, if you can relate things that way, I think it helps us have a little better understanding. And those requirements that you need, they change annually, seasonally, by the sex of the animal. Males and females prefer different things in their habitat from time to time, the age of the animal, and then the habitats change through succession. And succession we'll talk about more in detail, is how those places change over time. But think about, again, the requirements that you change on an annual basis. And of course, seasonal basis falls into that annual basis. And think about this. I mean, we're getting ready to come into some warm weather, okay? So our shelter we still have a house to get in, but when we go outside in the summertime, we may wear a t-shirt. Whereas in the wintertime, we would wear, we'd wear a coat. Animals, what they do is they, some animals prefer sunny areas, reptiles, for example, that's how they warm up and get their blood flowing. But then in the wintertime, animals need a place to protect themselves. So again, I don't want to give animals human characteristics, but I think they interrelate a little bit where it helps you understand the needs that they have. There's a lot of different food resources. And again, think about a human being. You go and if you want salads, you get lettuce, and then you go get eggs, and then you might go get some kind of meat, some kind of dressing. Well, not everybody likes a salad. Some people would want, maybe they'd want canned soup, or maybe they would want a sandwich, or maybe things like that. So animals are the same way. They have, depending on what they are, they have different needs and different food sources. And if you look in the top left, there's invertebrates, which are insects. Below that's eggs. Below that is prey. We often don't think about, but unfortunately, we have a lot of black vultures and a lot of vultures. Well, they clean up a lot of that stuff, and they actually have a useful place in the ecosystem. Right in the center here, we have mast, and mast is broken down into hard mast, which is like acorns, and basically hard just means it's a hard nut to crack, so to speak. Look to the right of that fruit is considered soft mast. It's a fleshy, you squish it, like a cherry or something like that. To the top right is forages, where they just eat the leaves and plants. And then on the bottom right is nectar. And there's a lot of, of course, the insects, butterflies and birds, hummingbirds and things like that, like the nectar of different flowers of different plants. The types of cover, again, your backyard may not look like this, but if you live in a subdivision, maybe there's green space, and that green space, I'm not a big fan of homeowners associations, but at the same time, if you're paying to be in that homeowners association and there's green space and you know something about cover, you might be able to make some suggestions that would help them enhance that green space to attract more birds or whatever you'd like to see there. So some of the types of cover, if you look in the top left, is roosting and nesting cover. Turkeys, for example, lots of birds, they'll roost there. They'll nest in that layer close to the ground where they're hidden and protected and can run away. They can see very well in many cases, and they could see a predator coming. Look at the bottom left is escape and nesting cover. And you'll see this looks to be sort of a late summer picture, because a lot of the greenery is starting to turn brown. The cornfield there, whether that's corn for a crop or corn for a wildlife plot, you can see it starting to brown. And so, but what you can see there is that corn comes into that thick vegetation around the perimeter of the field into those woodlands. And, animals, when they need to hide or get away, they need something thick like that. They can't just run across an open field or open yard and be protected. On the top right is thermal nesting cover. And what we're really pointing out there is those white pines. There's microclimates in there, and those microclimates, what they do is they provide, it's a little warmer for birds in there. Of course, birds are designed, the feathers are designed such that they're hollow, and then also they can sort of fluff themselves up to create thermal insulation. But then they can also, not just them, but other animals can get inside of those trees or under those trees, and they're protected from the weather and the elements. And then the bottom right is brooding and nesting cover. And again, those are where animals, will, maybe the young will lay out there in the sun. Maybe the birds will find insects. Maybe they'll find forbs, different things. But that cover right there, they can, for the most part, they can walk around on the ground between those plants, and they can get by. One of the issues that we have in wildlife management is that you have vegetation. There's some vegetation out there that grows so thick that little critters cannot walk around on the ground. They can't get around in it, so they don't stay in it. And that's one thing to think about if you're trying to create an area that they like. Some of the sources of cover are herbaceous plants, woody shrubs, live trees, dead down trees, and rock piles. Um, if you look right here, a brush pile, you think, my goodness, I don't want one of those on my place. But believe it or not, I own about 3 acres and it's mostly open. There's tree lines down most of either side. But in the back of my property, there's just a fescue field, just mostly fescue with some clover and some different weeds and things. I'm real good at growing weeds. But I have a brush pile. That's where I burn my brush. Now, the brush pile they're talking about is to provide cover. And what I do is when I have dead limbs or whatever throughout the year, I just pile all of that up and create a brush pile. And there is never a time that I go by there that I either don't jump a rabbit out of it or run birds out of that brush pile. Of course, once I burn it, it goes away. But at the same time, you can create brush piles if you have the property to do so. And it doesn't take much. You can create brush piles that are year round. And I used to, years ago, I lived on 3 acres again, but it was wooded, not open. And I had 2 or 3 brush piles that was created out of treetops and different things. And there is always some kind of critter around those brush piles. On the right is a snag. Now, I wouldn't recommend that you leave one of those close to your home or right in your yard, but you can see this is more of a woodland. These snags become hollow. As they decay, there's lots of insects try to break them down, and those insects provide food for animals, birds in particular, and then the hollow snag itself provides home. So all of those components can be utilized. Now you don't want your whole forest full of snags, but every once in a while they are nice things to have. Some birds build nests in them. Woodpeckers utilize them. They're just a beneficial part of wildlife habitat. Water requirements, essential for drinking like it would be for us, especially if you're large animals. Some animals live in water. Some animals get their food from water, and some animals have to have water for reproduction purposes. Of course, amphibians and fish and things like that. And you can see the difference. The bottom left picture looks just like a creek more than anything, but you can see some ducks there. The top right is habitat that somebody probably has created or flooded to encourage waterfowl to come in. And then if you look at on the bottom right, of course, you've got a bird waterer, and you attract birds into your yard for that. And that's something that you can keep year round. Just needs to be clean, fresh water as much as you can put it in there. So the space requirements, again, they're dependent upon many factors, the species that you have, and just in simple terms, the larger the animal, the larger amount of space that they need. If you're, we don't like to think about having mice necessarily, but a mouse doesn't need very much space to live in as long as it's got its habitat components. A rabbit, for example, coming up in size, needs about 40 acres to live its life on as long as it's got the habitat requirements. White-tailed deer, turkey need about a square mile or 640 acres. And they roam around that. That doesn't mean they won't leave that and come back into it. But then, let's just think about something extreme like a grizzly bear or a wolverine, a very large mammal. They need thousands of acres to live on. So the larger the animal, the more space. The population density, obviously, the more animals that you have on a piece of property, the more of the other habitat requirements they need to be able to stay there. So space may limit what the density is. The competition is created with that density. The season, if you think about the season, think about areas here in Middle Tennessee, just in particular, let's just think about farmer's field, crop field, before long, if they haven't already, they're going to be planting corn, and that corn will stay there until early fall, late summer. And so a lot of animals can hide in those cornfields. Well, once that cornfield's gone, they don't have that to hide in anymore. So every time the habitat changes, and we don't really think about crop fields as habitat, but it is, when those things change, those animals have to change with it so that they can stay in cover And of course, it provides food. But once that food source is gone, then they have to go to other sources. And again, we talked about food availability and cover availability. I just mentioned those, talking about crop fields. So the carrying capacity, to bring all that together, the maximum number of animals an area can support, and it's defined by the limiting factor. So if we talked about the four habitat needs, water, food, cover, and space, okay, whichever one of those four things is the most limiting factor, in this case, the staves on the barrel to the right, the food is the shortest one. The food is going to determine how many animals can live in an area. Okay, and that area again varies. And if you break it down, like I had mentioned, let's say that you really enjoy a certain type of bird and you want to see that bird in your backyard, you need to study the habitat requirements of that animal, that bird in particular, and the things that they need. You need to create those things. Okay, so if you want that bird in the area, you have to create a habitat that's desirable for them. For example, bluebirds, they need large open areas, and so if all of your backyard is wooded and grown up thick, you're probably not going to see very many bluebirds. If you have, like I do, if you have a relatively open space, you're going to see some bluebirds. And just remember that you pretty much never manage for just one species of animal. Whatever you do for one is going to benefit a number of those, because they're not unique in that. In most cases, some animals are real unique in some of the things that they need, but for the most part, the animals that you have on your property, whatever you do to benefit one is going to benefit more than one. But when you think about management and what you need to get something in an area, you want to think about that one specifically and how you can enhance it for them. So if you exceed the carrying capacity, you get overbrowsing or overgrazing by the larger animals. You have an increased disease and parasite risk. The overall animal weight is less, the overall health is less, and you have much more stress in that wildlife population. And so, wild hogs we hear about, and they're, I don't know where all they are in Middle Tennessee, but I know they're in Middle Tennessee. They have disease and parasite problems. They destroy habitat for other animals. They're not native. So, again, it goes back to your management objectives, and the goal for wild hogs, obviously, is to get rid of as many of those as can to benefit the other animals. So here's some big terms that that are important if you're thinking about managing property to encourage wildlife to use that. And the first one is called edge, and that's pretty self-explanatory. It's where two habitats meet. So if you have, for example, let's say you've got a pasture, and that pasture meets up with some hardwoods or a forested area, where those two areas meet is called an edge. Now, there's two types of edges. One is called a hard edge, and one is called a soft edge. The one I just described would be considered a hard edge because it goes, if you think about, I guess I should have moved my slides. If you think about plant succession and how plants grow over time, one of the things that you see is if you just take an area that has nothing growing on it, let it go for, let's say 2 or 3 years, things are going to grow there. There's a seed bank there. Okay. Let it grow for 8 or 10 and you're going to have woody plants. It's going to become what we call a thicket. Let it go 40, 50, 60 years, it's going to become a woodland. Okay. So the way you manage wildlife habitat is by changing or controlling those successional stages. You do what it takes to keep it either in a successional stage, allow it to mature to another successional stage. But if you think about that gradual growth over time, and then let's go back to where the pasture meets the forest. Okay, the pasture, for example, or the field would be early successional plants, where the forest is probably 50 years old or older, and that's a hard edge. And so what that means is you're missing all those middle stages of development. So it's called a hard edge, where the edge is where the two habitats meet, But a hard edge is where those habitats are separated in terms of their age, if that makes sense. So let's talk about a soft edge. A soft edge, on the other hand, you could still have your hardwoods, but then you would have about a 30 to 50-foot band that was a brush area. And if you'll remember back to the picture that I showed you that had the cornfield and then the weedy area and then the thick woods, that is considered soft edges. Okay. So if you can get that in your mind, there's a huge difference between soft and hard edges. Juxtaposition is the proximity of the habitats. That's where they're placed on the land. Okay. If you have 100 acres, all right, and that 100 acres is relatively open, and you've got a little bit of woods over in one corner of the property, and the other section of woods is over in the opposite corner of the property, the juxtaposition or the proximity of those habitats is not very good. Okay. And so when you talk about habitat needs for a particular animal, what you want to do is you want to put those in close enough proximity to one another that those animals can use them. And take, for example, let's talk about 100 acres. You've got woods on one corner, and then the opposite corner, you've got woods, and you've got a big 100-acre block with nothing in between. Well, the way that you would create you'd have a better juxtaposition of those habitats would be you would plant trees to connect those two woodlots. And you can do that on your area, but that's got to be something that you want to do on your property. If you have, again, let's talk about rabbits. If you have 2 rabbit habitats and they're 100 acres apart, and of course, some of our backyards may or may not be that big, but they're 100 acres apart, those rabbits are probably not going to go from that one habitat to the other because they have no cover in between to feel protected. Okay. So the interspersion, which is a third word, is the mixing of different habitats. And the way that you, if the way you do that, if you have 100 acres and you divide that 100 acres into, let's say 5 20-acre blocks, and you mix up those habitat types, well, all of a sudden your interspersion, is you're changing habitats very quickly. And as you do that, you create lots of edge because each of those blocks have a smaller edge around them. It's almost the concept that you can get more in a crooked row than you can a straight row. And so when you provide more edge, you get more resources. It's not a cure-all. The composition of those types of those habitats is the most important thing. What's in there and how it's created is more important. But the closer the proximity that those habitat types are and varied, an animal like a rabbit or something small that needs those close together will benefit more. So this is another thing that we don't think about is our vertical structure. How many times have you driven by a woodland and it's just wide open and there's not much growing underneath like there is in the picture that we see here? And so the density, the height, and arrangement of the vegetation on a vertical nature determines species of songbirds that are present and their abundance. And it's critical for many songbirds. And so these, if you look down on the left, these are shortened versions, but the VIR would be vireos, WR would be wrens, WAR is different types of warblers, AM red is American red throat, again warblers, yellow throat, warblers, eastern towhee, brown thrasher. I can't remember which one that is, but anyway, there's lots of songbirds, and I'm not a songbird person. I don't know those as well as some other things, but all of those animals need that structure up and down, that vertical structure. So we talked about succession. I should have put this slide. I need to move this slide now that I think about it. It's just basically the progression and changes in a community composition over time. Different species require different stages and habitats are managed through disturbance. And in this case, you can see that the bottom left photo, this is a woodland where trees have been harvested, and this has been able to grow back. And when I was in school, I thought clear cutting. When I went to school at an Appalachian school, where coal mining was something that was on their minds a lot. Clear cutting was on their minds, and just destroying land is a lot of people viewed it that way. And there's so many challenges trying to get the resources of the earth to a usable point. Clear cuts is one of those things that I had created in my mind was a bad thing. And I think most people think it's a bad thing if they're not done properly. There's proper ways to do that. But more importantly, all of a sudden you've got a forest that's 80 years old and all of a sudden it's gone. Well, the fact of the matter is it's really being a wise steward in lots of ways. Think about people again. People do not live forever here on this earth, and trees don't either. There's every time somebody calls me about a tree that they're having problems with in their yard, they say, well, I don't want to lose my tree. Well, I don't want them to lose the tree either. But the fact of the matter is, those trees are not going to live forever. And it may be time for that tree to be removed, especially if it's a danger either to them or their neighbors or their homes or cars, or it's just really unhealthy. I cannot determine how long a tree is going to survive, and I don't think anybody else can either. But what I do know is when a forest gets to a point that the trees now it would be easy to say, just leave it alone, it'll take care of itself. I don't know that that's always being a good steward of the resources we have, because in a forested area, those trees mature. When you see those trees starting to fall on the ground, that's dollars that you could be making, and you could get a forester to come in there and help you come up with a forestry plan. When they come up with a forestry plan, not only can you cut those trees and generate an income for yourself, what you can do is you can go back with a reforestation plan on your property that may be even better than what was there to begin with. So you need folks that understand those processes to help you walk through those. And if you don't understand it, do some research or talk to the foresters or wildlife managers and see what you can do to improve the land, both for the wildlife resource, the forestry, and also for the aesthetics of it, what you would enjoy seeing. One of the things that you have to remember, I have a really good friend that went through school in the forestry department up at UT, and I did some graduate work in wildlife up there, is you cannot manage wildlife without managing the plant material in the forest. You can, however, manage the forest without managing the wildlife. Seems contradictory, but if your objective is the trees, you don't have to worry about the wildlife. But I personally would prefer to manage both and have both be beneficial. If you look to the right there, you'll see that fire is often used. In March of 20, there was a fire went through. I say went through, it was a managed fire. It wasn't a wildfire, to burn the debris off. And this top photo on the right. And then in July of 2000, of course, that's been 20 years now, but July of 2000, you can see the vegetation that has come back. There's lots of new forbs and benefits. One of the things that's not recommended as much as it used to be is bush hogging. And one reason bush hogging is not recommended is because when you bush hog, that grass debris just lays on top of the stubble or becomes stubble, and it makes a thick mat. Again, mice can get through there, snakes probably can get through there, but those small critters that we deem desirable, the small birds, the turkey poults, quail, if you're lucky enough to have some of those, cannot maneuver through that. So the number of species present is species richness, that's plants and animals. It's not the number of animals present. That would be the population. So if you increase the plant diversity, you almost always increase the diversity of the animals that's on the property. And that's where those edges come in so handy. You basically, an edge is where those two habitats meet, but that edge has both habitat types in it, so it's more diverse. So what do? You develop a plan for your home. This slide is somewhat offbeat in my opinion, but it does present the concepts that we want to share. If you look on the left, this is a landscape design of this home, and this picture to the right, you're looking out the back of this house, and here's the deck right here, and then you're looking at this yard right here behind you, and of course this house right here would be behind this lot, and you can see. And this is something I talked to someone about just this week. They were talking about landscaping at their homes, and what they did is they bought small plants, and that's fine. I mean, basically they're going to grow if you take care of those and prune them correctly and all that, and take care of them. And so you come up with your own plan. It don't have to be fancy like the one here. This is a professional design plan, obviously, but understand that the bigger the plants are, the more you're going to pay for them. So in this case, what they did is they had a plan, designed a plan, and you can see it's pretty open right here. And you got a hummingbird feeder, and you got some birds playing in the yard and different things. Well, you fast forward and those plants grow. You get different types of birds in there. And I just, I think this is just off base, but it does present the point. You get different kinds of birds, different kinds of animals, and larger birds coming in. Now, I don't know. I mean, this looks like a wilderness. Doesn't even look like a backyard anymore. And I'm not so sure. I mean, you may have a hawk come by, but I'm not so sure you're going to get a pheasant flying across your backyard. Okay, not in this part of the world. And you can see there's a possum in the back. There's a duck on the water hole. That could happen. That wouldn't surprise me. I've seen some pretty unusual things over the years, but the point being is those plants are going to grow. You need to make sure that you think about that when you plant something in your yard. And you can see this was a small yard, and you can see what kind of creation they have made by letting these plants grow over time. And this has been, again, trees don't grow real fast. So there's no telling. It's probably a 20-year change or more in the way some of these things are. So feeders are something that you can use for birds. Everybody seems to like feeders, and a couple of things to think about with your feeders. If you have a feeder, and we'll see this on the next slide, a feeder like this top left one with the cardinal that's open, make sure that you drill holes in the bottom of that pan so the water can get out. You don't want mushy feed. Hummingbird feeders, you can put those out. Everybody, I think, enjoys hummingbirds. Keep a roof over these. This keeps a squirrel from coming down and being able to get up under this feeder. The feeder in the bottom, squirrels can climb up in that. And I had a client one time tell me that they actually saw a hawk fly under the feeder and grab a bird sitting on the feeder. That was just amazing to me. But that made me think about the design of the roof. If it needs to be low enough that these little birds can get in there, but not that, for example, a hawk or something trying to get them can get in there. And then also on the post that would be sitting on, you want to put something there to keep raccoons and snakes and different things from crawling up. And then you got a goldfinch feeder here on the right. There's lots of feeders out there. So different birds prefer different types of seeds. Their beaks, if you look at their beaks, you'll see that they're created different for different types of seeds. Fruits, breadcrumbs, peanut butter, suet, cracked nuts. You want to clean the feeders periodically. Hot soapy water with a little bleach, usually a 10% bleach solution, that will take care of any issues you have with mold, things like that. Make sure, again, the holes are in the bottom. They can attract rodents, so don't put your feeder on your porch. I had a lady one time call me, and she had put her feeder on her porch. She's a friend of mine, and she said that probably wasn't the best thing, and we agreed it wasn't. It attracts rodents, and all her chickens were coming up on her porch, and they were making a mess. Hummingbird nectar is 4 parts water, 1 part sugar. Red food coloring does not harm them. Clean often, clean the hummingbird feeders with hot water and vinegar to discourage mold. And feeders can stay out year round. My father-in-law, for example, asked me a couple of weeks ago, he said, well, it's about time to quit feeding. Even though there's plenty of food out there now, you can still put the feeders out there, especially if you want to see the birds coming by. Nest boxes are great to have. It helps you keep the birds close by. Nest boxes need to be built to fit the bird that you want to use it. You can see top center is a wood duck box. It's actually out in the marshy area. These top right houses are bat houses. Just saw on Facebook yesterday where a friend of mine had put one of those in his barn. It was a different style, but he put that in his barn. They eat tons and tons and tons of insects, so they're good to have around. This one here on the bottom left is a bluebird house, and see how it's out in the open. I believe, I can't remember the specifics. You can look it up on the web. I believe they need to be 100 yards apart to prevent competition, and they need to be faced a certain direction, but I can't remember what that is on the top of my head. Bottom right is another a bird house. I can't remember what design this one is specifically, but again, different birds prefer different size holes in their house and also size houses. Water sources, keep them clean, create a water garden, put them near shade, put wetland plants in there, and you can get a lot of visitors. And of course, again, my favorite visitors is kids. You know, when I was a kid, if I got close to water, I was wet all over. Mom didn't like that, but sure was a good way to grow up. So you get birds, mammals, reptiles, and amphibians. Some of them you may want, some of them you may not. Use wildlife-friendly plants. Again, the mass producers, we talked about hard and soft mass. Evergreens, I prefer oaks, hickories, things with soft and hard mass. I know in my part of the world where I live, cedars are abundant. I personally would not plant a cedar anywhere because we have plenty of them. There's other parts of the world may not have them. They may be beneficial at that point. You can see where this one has been eaten by deer up so high, and they do have a little blue cone on them that birds seem to utilize. So those are things to think about. Evergreens, and you can see these birds, I've seen this in the wintertime numerous times where birds would just get on basically a snag looking tree, no leaves in the wintertime, deciduous, and they just sit there during the daytime. But at nighttime, they go up into areas where they can be protected in that microclimate, like pines, evergreens, things like that. And so, you know, they nest boxes, evergreens, things like that provide protection for your birds in your backyard. There's lots of shrubs. I won't read this list to you. All you have to do is look on the web. The University of Tennessee, Craig Harper, has got some publications on wildlife-friendly plantings. All of those plants will have some type of soft mast or hard mast. Some of them grow quickly. Most, obviously, the trees don't. It'll take a while to get them. But you don't have to do it all at once. You can do things a little bit at a time. Wildlife-friendly plants, even weeds, Joe Pye weeds. You can plant clovers. Lots of animals like clover. You know, they got the nectar there, and you'll see butterflies and you'll see bees and stuff utilizing those. Different types of flowers you can plant in your yard: cone flowers, columbine, butterfly weed, milkweeds. All of those you can create butterfly gardens and bird gardens. They're beneficial to get those things in that you like to see. And so as you develop the habitats, you want to keep the interspersion, you know, those habitat types close together, as well as vertical structure. Put your feeders in houses appropriately. Use wildlife-friendly plants and try to arrange those, you know, so that they will be best utilized. And if you look at these slides here, again, when you cover your yard up with plantings like that, you create more work here in many cases, but you do eliminate some of your mowing. But there's no telling how many critters will utilize this type yard. One of the things that you know, some people are real stickler. They put wreaths on their door. This one has a bird nest in it. Birds are going to make a mess with their droppings, but just think about the opportunity to let your kids or grandkids see that nest develop. You know, don't let them touch it or whatnot, but you can pick them up or or videotape it or whatever, those birds come in there, they build a nest in a place that's good that they can find. Then what they do is they raise their young there and they leave. So they're not there year round. They're there just long enough to get those little ones out. And that is one heck of an education for a young person. And sometimes even for us, it's something we like to see. So I would encourage you, let them do their thing, buy another wreath, get you some, they're going to make a mess, and clean that mess up afterwards, but enjoy them while they're there. Brush piles you can use. Again, we talked about, you put the big sticks at the bottom, throw the brush on top, and those you can, if you've got large enough space, you can leave them. If you don't, you can do like I do, and you can burn your brush pile. Cats is one of the things that we often don't think about. Everybody loves the barn cat because it keeps mice and rats out. I do have a friend, at least one, and he's a farmer. He went in to get his spray rig to start spraying for corn, and the mice and rats had chewed some of the electric harness on his sprayer to the tune of $10,000 worth of damage. So this, fortunately, he's got, he's smart enough that he can make some of these repairs. But anyway, to have the factory do that, make that repair, it was going to be 10 grand. And so having a cat to kill those mice, would be very, very beneficial. But the fact of the matter is, cats they're created as an ultimate predator almost, and they will kill small rabbits, they will kill small mammals, they will kill small birds. And Dr. Harper told me one time that his daughter, when she was in school, took a game camera and they had a pile of where they threw their scrap food, and put a game camera out there. And I believe they saw, in a week's time, I believe they saw 7 different cats come by there. And so there's a lot of cats out there that we don't see very often or don't know about. But cats are not always the creatures that we think they are. And so, I encourage you to think about being very, very careful about cats in your wildlife landscape. Again, you can kill plants by girdling them with a chainsaw and create your own snags, especially if it's a tree that doesn't have a very good timber production or very good wildlife use. You can burn your wood lots. Again, once you burn, you get some lush vegetation. Here again, you burn every 2 to 3 years. And the Tennessee Division of Forestry will help you with that if that's something you want to do. And again, Dr. Harper's our extension wildlife specialist. If you have questions about wildlife or habitat or even animal damage control, you can contact your local extension office. You can also contact exterminators. There are people now that will if you have animal damage problems, there's people out there now that will help you control those, where it used to be just exterminators with the insects like Terminex and things, and they didn't do that thing. Now there's vertebrate pest control operators. And so anyway, if you have wildlife issues, give your extension office a call, and I'm sure they'll try to help you get an answer to enhance your property. So with that being said, I think that's it, Darby.
All right. If anybody has any questions, you can ask them. You can unmute and ask Dill now. I don't see any in the chat, Dill, on there. So
Okay.
We'll give them just a minute.
If anybody does, I mean, ask your local county agent. They can email me if they need to, or that kind of thing. So one thing that I almost always say, and you've heard me say this before, when you're, there's a lot of misconceptions about wildlife in particular, and even agriculture, lots of types of agriculture. And so when you do Google searches, or when you do searches on the web to find information, if you'll put the word extension in there, like University of Tennessee Extension that we all work for, if you'll put extension information on wildlife habitat or backyard wildlife, what you'll do is you'll get the better publications coming up because they're all research based and they've been proven. It's not just somebody's home remedy or wives' tale. So that's pretty important to remember as you're gathering information.
All right, it doesn't look like you're getting any other questions or anything, Dill. So with that, we want to say thank you all for joining our 2021 Southern Home and Lawn or Home and Garden virtual presentations, and we hope that you'll stop by our social media sites and check out our sponsors and our vendors.
Thank you, Darby. Thank you, everyone.